Hello, and welcome to the OTCQX educational webinar on social media strategies for reaching investors with our guest speaker, Jeff Ramson, founder and CEO of PCG Advisory Group. I'm Bob Power, Vice President of Corporate Relations at OTC Markets Group. And now, I'd like to welcome Jeff Ramson, founder and CEO of PCG Advisory Group. Welcome, Jeff, and thanks for joining us as a featured speaker.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Ramson, and I'm the founder and CEO of PCG Advisory Group and our subsidiary company, Prism Digital Media. I want to thank Bob Power and the team at OTC Markets for inviting me to present today's webinar, which is all about reaching investors through the intelligent use of social media. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time from your busy schedules to join us today to explore a subject that can transform your business life. For the better part of 8 years, I have been evangelizing the thoughtful and proper use of new technologies that have transformed the way the world communicates. I can say from significant direct experience that the emerging public company population has been amongst the slowest to adapt to these changes and also amongst the most likely to benefit from its adaptation. My goal today is to share my thoughts, experience, and insights along with specific tips and strategies for implementation. My hope is that you can use these insights to better inform your decisions and actions so that your digital strategies are optimal and guided by industry best practices. In addition, I want you to understand why I refer to your social media presence as a key asset important to the future of your company. This is all about growing your digital assets. Well, I like to share my philosophies and theories on investor-focused social media. The practical reality is that the properly utilized and leveraged, your digital assets are a powerful tool for your business. I have found that there are 4 critical questions CEOs will want answered regarding social media. What is the benefit? What will this cost in time and money? How will I know this is working? And what is my risk? I will address each of these very important topics throughout today's presentation, but a few comments and key statistics may be helpful to state here at the outset. 49% of professional investors are reading blogs. 52% of institutional investors use social media as part of their research process. 63% of institutional investors believe social media will become increasingly important to them. And perhaps most important, 68% of high net worth investors under the age of 45 use Facebook, 64% use LinkedIn, and 36% use Twitter. A study done at Stanford University in 2014 measured bid-ask spreads as a proxy for liquidity. They found that the active and proper use of Twitter resulted in narrower market spreads, particularly amongst small visibility firms. I think these facts and figures clearly address the first and maybe the most important question we get: what is the benefit? So the agenda for today's presentation begins with why social media is important in today's world, the importance of social media for public companies, social media strategies, regulation and compliance, social media platforms, their purposes and distinctions, maximizing your reach using your OTC IQ portal, and then a bit about PCG Advisory and Prism Digital Media and how we work with our clients. So why is this moment important? We're all familiar with Amazon, Uber, Netflix, and Airbnb. You don't need me to explain the disruptive technologies these companies have introduced, which have created paradigm shifts in the ways we all live and do business. Most don't yet see how a similar transformation is occurring in the investment world. This disintermediation opens up enormous opportunities for less visible public companies to leverage technology to target and attract the most meaningful audience and to facilitate meaningful dialogue. In effect, there's an elimination of the clutter of how information is disseminated and shared. More and more investors are defining themselves as self-directed, making their own decisions without benefit of a broker or intermediary. They get their investment ideas from research on the web, which includes social media conversations, and can seamlessly place an order with their online broker. Many online brokers are integrating social components to their trading platforms. This is disintermediation. So the most meaningful measure is growth. Success in the virtual world translates into success in the physical world when goals are clear, strategy is articulated, audience is built, message is consistent, creative, and dynamic, and the latest, most sophisticated social media tools are applied with a discipline of experience. It's not enough just to be there. You have to do it the right way. So let's start looking at some of the factors that explain why social media has gathered speed in the investment world. I look at 2008 as the chaotic birthplace of social media as a business tool. Most of us will remember the horrific market events and the resulting decrease in investor confidence and liquidity. This led to high levels of corporate distrust amongst the public and significantly more financial regulation. This made it much harder for smaller public companies to reach new investors. Prior to these events, companies could access investors through relationships with regional broker-dealers and retail brokerage networks. As a result of the crash and stricter regulations, these channels were effectively closed. At the same time, social media technologies were emerging. While originally designed for social purposes, these platforms offered companies the opportunity to create their own voice, target their own audience, and directly share their own messages. I like to think of this time, with a little bit of nostalgia, as I remember as a middle-aged man in 2008, trying to go out and market this new service to a bunch of other middle-aged men running small public companies. And you could probably imagine the response I would get as if I had two heads. Talking about social media in 2008 and 2009, a typical response would be something along the lines of, my daughter's on Facebook. I would never be on Facebook. That's for children. So it took a bit of persistence to kind of get through that resistance. And we kind of joke about that there's kind of 5 stages of grief, and there's 5 stages of grief over social media for public company CEOs. And it starts with complete dismissal, denial, reluctant curiosity, begrudging acknowledgement, and then finally acceptance and hope. And our goal when we work with our clients is to make sure that our clients are not just checking boxes and doing social media because they have to now. We want to make sure they're optimizing all of their opportunities and utilizing all the tools to the best of their abilities.
Jeff, when you talk to companies, is there a typical stage that you see the CEOs at now versus 7 or 8 years ago?
That's a great question. So yes, they are at the stage now where they know they have to have it. They're bored. Yeah. They're asking about it. They're inquiring. They don't really understand it fully yet. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of our job, is to explain what they can get out of it and why it's important, and guide them through how to best manage it, get the most from it. But yes, the answer is that they're now at the stage, and that's why I think we're on a bit of an inflection point. Right. We're at that acceptance and hope stage, mm-hmm, for most companies. So what is the impact of social media? I think recent events in the political arena have put to rest any debate about the power of social media. People spend twice as much time online as they did 12 years ago, and I would assert that the pace is increasing. Social media, not to be confused with digital advertising or search engine optimization, is truly about delivering an authentic message to a targeted audience, engendering trust through transparency. Social media allows for the democratization of information on the web, meaning every company, no matter the size, has the ability to reach a significant stakeholder base. The only limitation is ingenuity. There's a phrase that we like to use as well, which is, I didn't invent the phrase, but I'm applying it to this particular purpose. Visibility is viability. Almost every company we see is looking for more visibility. They've got great stories. They want an audience to share that story with, and the nature of the audience and how they're reached has changed. And that's why, why we talk about social media. With social media tools, we can literally go out and target the people that will be predisposed to be interested in your company based on the topics that are important to you. So you could target the traditional investors that companies normally approach, but in doing so also cast the net wider? Exactly. So the tools are really incredible and allow for a really quality audience and level of engagement. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the importance of social media for public companies, which is why we're really here today. As mentioned earlier, proper and active use of social media can lead to increased liquidity and ultimately lower cost of capital. This is why we're here. This is why we're in the capital markets. The whole idea is to leverage your public company presence to raise capital at the lowest cost And we believe that, you know, having an active, vibrant social media presence increases liquidity, again, leading to lower capital cost. So there's some key statistics here that I think that add to what I said earlier. So social media empowers companies to find and engage with potential investors, as I just mentioned to Bob. Community of self-directed investors is growing rapidly. So there's more than 50 million self-directed U.S. investors, 25% are retail online, and these numbers, these are all, they grow so fast that from a few months back, you can imagine they're much larger now. 30% of high net worth investors define themselves as self-directed, so they're on the web continuously. The self-directed investor segment is growing nearly 5% annually, faster than the non-self-directed segment. And so what we do is we target social media databases to find those active self-described investors based on keywords, hashtags, cash tags, which I'll explain throughout. But again, this goes back to targeting the right audience for your company. If you're a biotech company, you don't necessarily want to be looking for investors that are looking for growth companies. And if you're an industrial company, you may not be looking for investors that are interested in biotech. So we want to make sure we target the right audience for the right companies.
So Jeff, we're joined by reps from a broad range of sectors on this call. Is there any sector that is more prevalent, or is it across the board?
It's definitely across the board. Every company has their own interesting story to tell and their own range of stakeholders that would be interested in what they've got to say. I do think that there are certain industries that may benefit more from the level of passion of their stakeholders. So for example, with biotech companies and life science companies, we find that when you're working on curing a disease, there's usually a very active, vocal stakeholder base that's very intrigued and interested in getting behind you. So that may, that can be a bit more interesting, but every company has their own story to tell, their own stakeholder base to reach. Thank you. An example, we're working currently with a company that's in the virtual reality space. So many people are aware of the changes in virtual reality and what's coming, and it's changing so rapidly that it's very hard to keep up with. However, there's an enormous stakeholder base of virtual reality and augmented reality enthusiasts. So right now we're working on building those databases for our client, and it's been an incredibly productive process so far.
Thanks. That's true.
So staying ahead in the digital universe. In the digital universe, it's important to enhance positive messages and diffuse negative ones. Done right, social media helps you achieve both of those goals. It's very important that not only are you speaking, but you're listening. It's important to monitor conversations that are they're taking place about you and about your industry and about your competitors. Now, what's equally important is once you have that information, is what do you do with that? And mistakes that we've seen certain companies make without professional guidance is sometimes getting involved in those conversations, and that can be a misguided approach. We tend to encourage our clients to be very circumspect in terms of engaging in conversations, especially when it's regarding negative commentary.
And the conversations in that case are public information, right?
Correct.
So that's something they should be aware of.
Exactly. It's a very slippery slope to get into a debate or try to refute statements of negative commentary. Mm-hmm. So best to really advise, work with consultants who are experienced and have dealt with this a number of times. One thing about social media also, and we talk about concerns that CEOs tend to have, is they feel that if they're involved in social media, they're going to get a lot of negative commentary. And my view is, if people are going to talk about you positively or negatively, they're going to talk about you anyway, with or without your participation. So it's out there. You need to listen to it, be aware of it. And not that you need to address it directly, but it could be factored into your communication strategy. If there's a misperception out there, maybe you want to factor that into your ongoing communications. But we certainly recommend that type of communication is handled through traditional means. But it's good information, and you need to be aware of it. One of the other major topics that we have to address with our clients is, how do you manage a social media presence well with limited resources? Many of our clients have limited resources, whether they be financial or human resources. So this is another area where I think it's important to hire professionals, and I don't mean this to be a commercial for us, but if you want to find validated professionals that have experience in the business of managing social media, because you get the benefit of their experience, their industry expertise, and having worked with so many companies, you see the mistakes that have been made and how to overcome them. But the reality is that there are processes to put in place that you can leverage to make the time and resource spent that much less. So, one key thing I want to mention in this topic is, content is something that scares most companies. You need to have engaging content, and we'll go through why that is not as difficult to manage as most people think. So I encourage you to subscribe to my CEO blog, it's on our website at pcgadvisory.com. In it, I cover many of the topics we're discussing today. One of my most important subjects is about building audience and the importance of stakeholders and influencers. A stakeholder is anyone who serves to benefit from the solutions offered by a company. Stakeholders are drawn together by common needs. Communities of stakeholders create buzz about needed solutions, breaking ground for the investor moment. Influencers direct attention towards certain solutions. Dynamic databases of stockholders reveal minute-to-minute preferences and highlight trends, all of which come into play when the investor moment arrives. So, again, I want to reiterate, what we tend to focus on stakeholders in the stakeholder spectrum. I understand, and we clearly understand, that our clients want to reach investors. But our belief is that the best way to reach investors is to target relevant, active stakeholders, which can include investors, but certainly can be customers, potential patients, healthcare professionals, if that's the industry you're in, journalists, bloggers, analysts. There's a whole number of people that are interested in what you're doing, many of which have not heard of you yet. So we want to make sure our clients become visible and that these stakeholders actually engage, become part of your community. And that I think makes it more interesting for the investors. So communities can only be sustained if they're engaged consistently with compelling content. To be compelling, content must be focused, valuable, and creative. It should be made up of curated and original content. It's not enough to only curate the work of others. To gain trust and keep credibility, you must also generate original content that expresses your digital persona. We or other trusted professionals can certainly help with content support. As I mentioned earlier, this is an area of concern for most companies. They really underestimate the amount of content that they have, and they think they have to always be saying something important and critical, and that's not necessarily the case. People do like to see a certain conversational flow and a cadence of information from companies, and some of it is curated. We like to find industry content that's relevant, non-controversial, non-biased. We don't, and you'll see in some coming slides, some do's and don'ts about social media. We don't want companies to go out and promote themselves, but there's lots of interesting content that relates to your industry, gives you thought leadership opportunities, and allows for a consistent flow of communication. It keeps your audience engaged. So a big topic really is thought leadership. And for a lot of our clients, that's really what they're marketing. Some of our clients are development stage. They don't have a product to sell, and they can't make claims. And what I encourage them to think of themselves as, they're thought leaders. They're all highly intelligent, highly successful people in other fields, or in their field of, outside of running that company. And I think that thought leadership is valued and creates trust in the communities that we're building. So the object is to win trust. You win trust by earning it. You earn it through transparency, originality, and consistency, and by sharing valuable, engaging information. Visuals enhance text. Video is particularly powerful. Once you've established that you're delivering substance, you can begin to deliver it with video. As Cara Alemo points out in her encyclopedic study, pitch, tweet, or engage on the street, a post with video is 100% more likely to be viewed. After viewing a video message, customers of all kinds are 85% more likely to buy. She quotes online video proponent David Merdico, "If social media is the rocket launcher, video is the rocket." So we, again, like to talk a lot about content, and content is not just text. Video is a very, very compelling form of content, and we highly encourage it. And again, quality group of professionals can help you in that area as well.
Jeff, with the video aspect of it, is there a time amount that you provide to the video? Is there a set amount of minutes or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So with today's attention span, we try to keep videos relatively short. You can, if you have a lengthier video, we like to break it up into clips.
Yep.
The idea is to keep it to get a message across in a short amount of time. So typically under a minute, maybe two, but we really try to keep it as short as possible. Get a message across. But again, it's great content. It gets you visibility. It helps bring more community, more into your community.
Mm-hmm.
So just some more statistics I want to point out. Some of these may be familiar to you, but as you can see, there's more and more activity that's digitally based, and you can see that aside from the stats regarding earnings conference calls, Twitter is being used to disseminate the information regarding those calls and driving a lot of traffic to them. And that's really what we want to hone in on, is really growing your audience so that when you are putting on presentations, you're getting that much more visibility. So a very important slide here is the do's and don'ts of social media. And one of the questions I asked in the beginning, where I mentioned, is what is my risk? And it's a great question because when you put something out on social media, it is public, it is permanent, and you need to be very, very careful and thoughtful. So as far as do's, we think it's very important to position management as industry thought leaders, and we're not, again, we're not trying to promote and hype a story. We're not promoting stock. What we are doing is giving credibility and credibility opportunities to management. So you want to deliver your corporate message appropriately. Like any other public dissemination of information, you want to make sure your story is accurate, that it can be supported. We think it's very important to keep all your social media profiles up to date, current, robust. They should be consistent. They should look the same. They should be your brand online should be pristine and have a great user experience for your followers. Very, very important is having disclaimers in place. So there's a debate as to whether you need to have disclaimers or not. We like to take the conservative approach. So we encourage our clients to put a disclaimer on their website that we can help them craft and their counsel can review. And we like to put a link to that disclaimer on their social media profiles. We think it just covers them for any potential issue that could come about, but better to be conservative on that front, in our opinion. The don'ts, as I mentioned, one is we're not promoting stock, and you as management of a public company certainly know that's not a reason to be using public communications. So that's a very, very important point, I think, above all others. You don't want to be providing false impressions. You need to make your messages authentic and honest. We think provoking competitors is a big mistake. There's no need for that, and no need to have the others coming back at you, same way. And again, no self-promotion. So I would say most people are familiar with the primary social media platforms, but I thought I'd cover them fairly quickly. Each social media platform has its own specific purpose and distinction. So first, Facebook, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. I'm not sure everyone's on, but I'm sure everyone's daughter is on it, as we know. But I think that more and more, Facebook is actually becoming widely used by maturing adults and certainly people of age that are running public companies. So Facebook builds audience efficiently, especially through group functionality and business pages. It's by far the biggest social network on the internet and most useful for general corporate communications. So as you can see, there's almost 2 billion active users, and there's lots of different ways you can leverage your message and your audience on Facebook. And we recommend 1 to 2 times a day for certain posts. And again, these are relatively benign posts, but it keeps the communication flowing. So Twitter, to me, is probably the most important social media platform for the purposes of our discussion. While it may be struggling as a business and people may be aware of the issues they're having, as a utility, it's highly valued. And the type of messaging, the way the messages are delivered, the way you can target investors and other stakeholders, the way they can find you is really, really optimal here on Twitter. So we highly recommend a very strong, active Twitter presence. And I think most important is a lot of financial information these days is being consumed on mobile devices, and Twitter really is the perfect delivery system for mobile devices. So critically important. Okay. So LinkedIn is a personal favorite of mine. I think LinkedIn provides the best platform for thought leadership opportunities for management. The quality of the audience is by far the most professional, and with proper etiquette and quality posts, your reach can be unparalleled. And I say proper etiquette because this is social media, and sometimes I like to talk about social media as somewhat like going to a cocktail party. If you're at a cocktail party and you start introducing yourself to people and telling them how great you are and all the great things you've done and how great your company is, you're probably going to find yourself without a lot of company. If you start meeting people and you start getting interested in them, asking them questions, engaging, and being an active listener, you tend to find a better response. So I think that when I talk about etiquette in social media, you need to kind of look at your activity there in a similar fashion. So LinkedIn is a professional network. People need to connect with you by invitation, but there are certain ways that you can reach out to people and introduce yourself, share your information in an engaging way, and really build audience and credibility. LinkedIn also has remarkable premium capabilities like Sales Navigator, which allows to anonymously save leads, any contacts of interest, and receive automatic updates. So I think that's another critical component that we recommend management use. Two lesser important platforms, but just worth mentioning, are Google Plus and Instagram. Instagram is actually becoming a bit more important for the clients that have good photo opportunities. That's really kind of a photo and video sharing platform. So for some companies that may not be as relevant, but for others, consumer products and things like that, it's actually highly relevant. And Google Plus is very, very important, mainly because it really does help your SEO capabilities, so we think it's important not to ignore it. It has less social benefit, but more search engine optimization. So there are a few financial-oriented platforms. I assume have heard of Seeking Alpha and StockTwits, and these platforms have evolved over the years, but these are essentially investor-focused social media platforms, each with their own set of rules and standards and types of audiences. I think Seeking Alpha has the largest investor network, built in, but it's a bit difficult to get coverage on Seeking Alpha, but it's good to be aware of it. And similar with StockTwits, this is kind of Twitter for stocks. If you're not familiar, it kind of became the place where cash tags were invented and became important. So if anyone doesn't know, a cash tag is essentially your stock symbol with a $sign in front of it. And what it allows people to do is search for you faster and know that when the cash tag is mentioned, it's typically a financial story or post. So the other and last most important thing to talk about is measuring success. So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Meaningful scoring and measurement is what makes social media matter. The most meaningful measurement is growth. However, growth can be measured both quantitatively and qualitatively. While a large number of community members is important, each member has its own level of influence and reach, and some are clearly more influential than others. Having key opinion leaders amongst your network is extremely valuable. All companies want to reach investors. However, the question to be asked is, why would an investor want to be reached by you? I would venture to say that the quality of your social media network is as important as the quantity. Investors are more interested in what other smart people are saying about you than what you're saying about yourself. This is why I emphasize targeting influencers, so that others of importance speak on your behalf. That makes you interesting to customers, analysts, journalists, and ultimately investors who are influenced by all of the above.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll just, as we wrap it up, I'll just talk about OTCIQ with a couple of comments. It's interesting to note that our website at OTC Markets gets over 1 million hits per month, so it's really important that that your profile be up to date. We also have made it very easy for our companies to upload information such as recent reports on the company or videos, that kind of thing. So, and finally, if you're curious, as an OTCQX company, how often someone may look at your quote, we can get that information for companies as well, just something to note. Okay. And, finally, we are very big proponents of social media. We use all of the tags that you mentioned, and we encourage you to tag at OTC Markets. We encourage the companies to do that, to get onto our social media networks as well. And Jeff, you also mentioned hashtag, very important. We spell it out right there. And give ourselves as an example, OTCM, OTCQX, $ OTCM, which is our symbol. So it's we're big proponents of social media ourselves as a company.
So just to recap, so PCG Advisory Group is my company, and we are an integrated corporate communications advisory firm. And I think that what distinguishes us is that we integrate all the different methodologies we discussed today into traditional investor relations activities. And then Prism Digital Media is a subsidiary company, as I mentioned, dedicated really to the social and digital media aspects that we covered today. And as you can see on the screen, we really cover the entire process, which starts with planning, architecture of your social media presence, really building out your digital assets, helping you come up with great content strategy, which includes content curation, how to distribute that content appropriately and most widely, how to engage and invite stakeholders into your network, how to reach influencers, and ultimately what I think is probably most important is really audience development, finding a targeted audience and growing it and nurturing it.
Jeff, thank you for a very informative presentation. We really appreciate it. As we wrap up, we do have a handful of questions that have come in. So I'll read the questions, and then we'll wrap up after that. Sure. The first question is hiding comments an all right practice? Should a comment that a company does not appreciate or agree with have to remain public?
Well, I think that you can set up, you can set your social media profiles up to not show comments. I think the important thing to do is to be consistent. I think unless it's a truly offensive comment, and you're showing all other comments, I think you need to kind of be consistent in your communication and show everything. But I would say that you have to make the choice up front whether you want to show comments or not, and that's something that you can discuss. But I think that once you are showing comments, you should probably show all, other than something that's offensive and shouldn't be published.
Thank you. Our next question: are investors on Facebook?
Yeah, so definitely investors are on Facebook. And usually if you're on Facebook, you are on multiple platforms as well. And without mentioning names, there's a client of ours that worked very hard on just a Facebook targeting approach and got 80,000 interested investors into their social media network, just targeting Facebook. Now, that was with an advertising campaign. It wasn't pure organic social media, but there are clearly investors on Facebook.
Interesting. Which platform is growing the quickest, the most rapidly?
Well, I think the platform that's growing the most rapidly is Instagram. However, that's not necessarily the most relevant platform for our type of work and for public companies, unless, as I mentioned earlier, if you're a company that's got something that would benefit from photo sharing and video sharing, I think that would be great. But on the whole, I think Twitter is still the most important for the types of work that we're in terms of trying to target investors and other key stakeholders.
Yeah, and there's a related question: what channel should I invest most of my time in when looking to invest time in this? And you think it's?
I clearly think it's Twitter for the purpose of building an audience, building an audience of the types of people you want following you, and it gives you the best way to communicate back with them. But again, I would certainly want to support that with the other platforms as well.
Okay, just a couple more. What types of external software should we use in our approach?
There are softwares that allow you to, time you and gather your content and time the posting of that content. There's things like Buffer and Sprout and other types of software. It really depends. That would be a conversation that we'd have to have to discuss what the goals are and what the strategy would be before we recommend software. But there are plenty to support that.
Got it. Okay, so it looks like we have one last question. Do you need a disclaimer for each platform, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera?
So you don't need a disclaimer for each platform, but I think you need a disclaimer on your website, and then you should have a link on each platform to your disclaimer on your website.
Okay.
There's very little room on certain platforms for a full disclaimer.
Yeah.
So I think a link is sufficient, and we've had legal advice that was sufficient, as long as the disclaimer on your website is full.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to wrap up the presentation and remind, first off, thank all the attendees for attending. We have recorded this. We will send a recording of the presentation to all attendees. We'll send a copy of the slides as well. And Jeff, I want to thank you for a really informative presentation on social media, and we appreciate that, and thank all of you attendees as well. And so we'll wrap it up now. Thank you.
Thank you.